Hello, it's Mother Isa again. This is the second talk that I'll be giving this retreat. We're nearing the end here, and hopefully you've gotten a lot out of this so far. This retreat is an unfolding, and I expect that you are really taking energy and time to reflect on the pieces that you've gotten so far and the exercises you've done. This next piece is about the divine masculine and divine feminine. It is, some of it will be very intuitive, and you might not even notice that it's different than things you knew before, but it's something that really may bear coming back to at another time. So you still have access to this content after the retreat. And this piece is really important because it works in and with a lot of other spiritual teachings. To understand the way that divine masculine and divine feminine work and how those energies become balanced in us is actually a really core part of spiritual unfoldment. And it may not be obvious right away how to apply that, but as you reflect in spiritual teachings and practices on masculine and feminine, coming back to this and looking at what does it mean and how does that balance between the masculine and the feminine propel and energize my growth. Because that's one of the main points you'll see here, is that it's not just a theoretical idea about divine masculine and divine feminine, but about how those energies work as a kind of powerhouse of energy in us when they're balanced in the right way to provide motivation, energy, focus, and completion of the spiritual goals and processes that we engage in. So enjoy. And please do write down questions and anything that comes to mind so that we can talk about it in the group gathering again, the Q&A after this. I hope you enjoy it. Bye-bye. Welcome. This is The Divine Feminine and the Divine Masculine by Mother Isadora Tures, Winter Retreat 2020. Is God male or female? The answer is neither, because God is not a sexually reproducing creature. So male and female are designations given to the two parts of sexually reproducing animals. Because God is not an animal and God does not sexually reproduce, God is not male or female. Is God feminine or masculine? And the answer is both. Femininity and masculinity are not restricted to biological sexes. Femininity is not tied to femaleness, and masculinity is not tied to maleness. They are more universal qualities of being, tendencies, aspects, and qualities. Now, they happen to show up a little more often in the sex that they're associated with, so masculinity in men and femininity in women. But as we'll show, that's really a very broad generality. And although it's useful in some ways, it also is problematic if it's taken too restrictively, if it's attached too concretely to physical sex. So this is the symbol for God passed down esoterically for many thousands of years. It is a circle with a dot at the center. The circle is the feminine, the dot is the masculine. So this representation includes both the masculine and the feminine aspects of God for many thousands of years coming up through antiquity. And the circle is holistic, encompassing. It's large, right? It holds everything. And the dot is the central focus. So we're going to get into how that relates to the feminine aspects and masculine aspects of God in the next slides. Dual or non-dual? The feminine and masculine energies are unified in God. They're non-dual. But the dense energies of Earth create a duality in these energies. This is designed to be a kind of perpetual motion engine that feeds vibrational development, which is the evolution of consciousness. So God at the highest level is non-dual. Creator God is non-dual. It's not two. It's not masculine or feminine. It's a complete unity of the two. There's not the so duality is when things are separated so that their aspects are made more clear. In Earth, it's a dense vibrational state. There's the most extreme difference between the two. And in the levels of God, between the dense state, like Earth, and the highest Creator God state, are a spectrum of duality. It's not really just dual or non-dual, it's how dual, kind of. So in Earth, the difference between masculine and feminine is the most obvious. They're the most different. But as we move up the levels of God, those differences become less and less obvious, more nuanced, until at the highest point they cease to exist. So as I suggested in the last slide, there is a reason for the more intense duality in this vibrational state, and that is because it provides, when balanced, an energetic fuel. So if you think of almost a magnetic polarity and switching between the two back and forth, you can actually create energy. You can create a spin, a movement that then produces electricity or whatever. So this, if you imagine it the same in the masculine and feminine, what it's doing is when the masculine and feminine are balanced, it's like this yin-yang symbol where the balance between the two creates a circular motion. It's moving, and this motion provides energy and motivation and inspiration for the development of human consciousness. So it is very purposeful. It is not accidental, and it's not a mistake that we have this duality here. It is an integral part of the energetic machine. It provides everything we need to want to move forward. Okay, so this is a statistical table that shows the overlap of masculine and feminine qualities in males and females. The blue line that goes like this here is the males, and the red line that waves like this are the females. The pink part here are females that are falling in the more masculine range, and the purple are the males falling in the more feminine range. And so everything inside here, in the whole middle here that's colored in, all across, is an overlap between masculine, feminine, female, male. So that's the whole portion is a mix of males and females. Now, only on the edges here do you get a clear distinction where these outlying males are more masculine than all the females in the study, and here the females more feminine than all the males. But this is on these are for biological traits. So when we're talking about more subtle spiritual qualities, the overlap is complete. There is no limitation to how spiritually feminine a man can be or how spiritually masculine a woman can be. But I wanted to show you this because I wanted to show you that even on the biological level, this is not so binary as is often talked about. It's not like males have all these qualities and they're completely distinct from females who have all these qualities. That's not true. And in here you can see the great deal of overlap. So we have way more in common as males and females, first of all, than we do different. And that goes all the way from body to brain on the biological realm. And then in terms of the more subtle qualities, there's no limitation. The thing that you should keep in mind, though, is that on average, these qualities tend to show up more often in the gender they're associated with. So we can see patterns in history. When you're looking at big numbers, whole populations of people, then you will see more of the feminine divine qualities in the masses of women and more of the divine masculine in masses of men. So the thing that people so much get confused about is that you cannot apply that to any individuals. when we're talking about populations, which are huge groups of people, there can be tendencies, but those tendencies cannot be applied to any individual because you don't know where they fall in this. So, you can assume that these masculine qualities would not apply, but down here is a woman that is in the extreme of masculine qualities. So you try to apply that generality to that person, you would be wildly inaccurate. So the generalities matter in terms of historical and big political context. They're not so important in individuals. In individuals, we need to be case by case. When you look at yourself, it's case by case. Okay, so let's get into what those qualities are now. So I want you to try to drop all the previous terms, because the problem is, even in spiritual contexts, terminology was used that had contextual and cultural bias. So, for example, the terms active and receptive were used. Active to represent men and receptive to represent women. But receptive often culturally gets translated to passive. And so what that looks like is active versus passive, and one obviously has a positive connotation, the other has a more negative connotation. So much so, these things were culture bound. They were really wrapped in systemic values we had. And since our culture has favored masculine qualities and masculine tendencies, that often made bias in the way the terms were used. So this is an effort to be very accurate energetically, and also to avoid cultural value systems that get applied to these things. So these are comparison. In the masculine, it is an energy of singularity, single focus, and in the feminine, multiplicity. The masculine is focused on I act, and the feminine more I am. The masculine agency comes via I can do, and the feminine agency is I can be. Now in the past, sometimes agency is attached to masculinity, but that's not true. Both have agency. They just have a different flavor to them. So masculine is more I can do. I have power by doing. And the feminine is being, power and activity via being. Masculine has exclusive action and feminine inclusive action. So exclusive means excluding certain aspects in order to be active. So, for example, sort of the picking the best of the best and then acting as a feminine action. Inclusive action would be crowdsourcing. So both of these things have value. This is like exclusive action is moving via the focus on the pieces that seem most competent, able, and then the feminine is by using the group, the crowdsource, you get the most potent action. So both have this potency and potential for power, just in different ways. So in focus, the same. Exclusive focus is eliminating all distraction. Eliminating everything that does not match what I'm trying to do and do only the thing that I set my mind to. Inclusive focus is using whatever's in the environment to contribute to the thing I'm focusing on. So next is purity/perfection via exclusion. And feminine is purity/wholeness via inclusion. So the kinds of purity are different. Masculine purity is more of a perfection exclusion model, which is that you eliminate all impurity, and that's how you get purity. Well, the feminine model is to sanctify everything that is. So you get purity via inclusion, sanctifying all that is. Now, each of these things is very powerful. These are each like a meditation on their own, and I would really encourage you to do just that. to take each of these comparisons and reflect on them. What is purity via elimination? What is purity via sanctification of the wholeness of all that is, via inclusion? There's so much richness in that could unfold in meditation. So the next is form, word, structure. There's the masculine. And the feminine is content, wisdom, meaning. The masculine deploys. The feminine gathers. The masculine consolidates. The feminine elaborates. The masculine develops expertise in one area of knowledge or skill. The feminine integrates as many areas of knowledge and skill as possible. The masculine you can think of as a melting pot. Bring everything into oneness, one thing, by infusing it all together, while the feminine is mosaic. Each thing retains its individuality while creating a wholeness of image or design. Masculine model of leadership is one leading the many. The feminine is many leading themselves. Masculine is personal responsibility. Feminine group responsibility. Masculine discipline via exclusion. And feminine is discipline via inclusion. So again, the inclusion-exclusion is an essential quality. Discipline via exclusion is you do only what you intended to do. You do the thing set out to do, and you exclude everything else. While the feminine is bringing discipline to everything you do. That's the feminine version of discipline that is inclusive. So masculine is decisive, feminine is understanding. Masculine is consolidation of power, feminine is a diffusion of power. So hopefully this is clarifying, but also hopefully what you're seeing is that both of them are equally valuable, and that to have the most healthy being, organization, society, world requires both of these elements in a harmonic relationship, in a loving relationship, in a marriage. Okay, so the model of marriage, divine marriage here, it's a marriage between the masculine and feminine. And if you think about that yin-yang symbol, it represents this, where each is separate, but has a piece of the other, and they move in a dance in this harmonious whole that creates dynamic energy. Okay, so where the issue often is not in how much masculine and feminine there is, but actually the underdevelopment of these features. So when they're immature, underdeveloped, they can be more destructive, and so this is what it looks like in both. And the masculine, underdeveloped, or immature expression can be tyrannical leadership. The feminine can be endlessly divisive. The masculine can be directly aggressive. The feminine, indirectly aggressive or undermining. The masculine can be oppressive via suppression of dissent, right? Get rid of all dissenting ideas, get back to a one. And the feminine can be dissent for the sake of dissent, taking things apart because they can be taken apart, not because it benefits. Masculine, meaningless or unproductive focus, so very focused on things that have no value. The feminine can be inability to prioritize, focusing on everything without clear objective or direction. Masculine can be isolating, and feminine can be enmeshing. Masculine can be action without consideration, and feminine can be consideration without action. So you see that there are also immature forms that can be destructive or can get in the way of development. And they're also equal. You see that the point here, though, is also to realize that it's not about being too much masculine or too much feminine. It's about being an underdeveloped form of that quality. And so growth and maturation and development is the goal, as always. So let's talk about balance. This comes back to this idea of too much. Often, the problem is that when we think about too much, too little, then we often think as if it's a closed system. Like there's only so much of something available, only so much good or value or appreciation. And so if we're going to balance the scales, then we need to take from one to give to the other. And that creates fear and anxiety. This idea that masculine has to be diminished for feminine to be elevated, that feminine has to be diminished for masculine to be elevated. And that is not the way the system works. That is a misunderstanding from egoic and lower vibrational consciousness. We can grow out of that. It's natural. It's part of who we are. It's not to be rejected as bad either, but it doesn't work well as we develop. So instead, we should think about more symbiotic mutualism. This is a concept in biology that when two things work together and are dependent on one another in a way that benefits both species, then that's symbiotic mutualism. So in this case, it's a fish tank and plants. So there can be a relationship between the roots of the plants and the fish tank, where the fish tank offers water, obviously, and the fish inside the fish tank, their feces offer nutrients for the plant. And in return, the plants clean the water, which allows the fish to live without suffocating in their own defecation. So this is a symbiotic mutualism. Both species nurture and benefit one another. And as both grow, they both get stronger. Okay, so this is how masculine and feminine really works in the spiritual realm. The strength of one strengthens the other. The weakness of one weakens the other. So they support one another. When they're in good relationship, when they're in harmony, they are both getting stronger. And they have a natural balance. That balance is created by the fact that there's a full knowledge of their symbiotic relationship, that they are two parts of one thing. So if one of them is out of balance, both suffer. There can be no, it's the opposite of a zero-sum game, where neither can win unless both win. Neither can grow unless both are growing. Neither can be successful unless both are successful. And if one is weak and injured and not enough, then the other needs to nurture it in order for itself to grow as well. Again, harmony creates motion and growth. So for ourselves, in our spiritual life and development, the goal is a balance. We have to be careful not to use the scale model of balance, where there's this idea of too much, not enough. And instead, what we're looking for is where the balance creates motion, where it creates a give and a take, a movement, a conversation, a flow. That is success. So if you pay attention to the energies, and what I would recommend is that you actually meditate on each of the qualities in the first big list, and how to develop like the balance in yourself between those. And that balance comes from love. It is a model of marriage, of love. The only way these can be balanced is honoring each other, appreciating the gifts of the other. And that's inside you. So look at in yourself. Don't assume that your biological sex represents where you tend to fall on the spectrum, because it very well may not. Instead, take an honest reflection upon yourself. Look at where you fall in each of these traits, and develop love for the other one. So if you tend to fall very heavily on the feminine in one area, instead of saying that's too much, it's not good, no, instead you want it to be healthy and developed feminine, and you want to nurture and love and encourage the masculine side of it. There's no such thing as too much. There is unhealthy and there's imbalanced, but not too much. So this is not a like a go in and fix. This is, how can I nourish development? How can I nourish balance in myself? That's the goal here. Okay, so this is a model of psychological and spiritual integration. Most of you are familiar with it, but if you're not, there's a whole YouTube video just on this. But this is a model that moves inward. So this is from biological defenses inward towards integration, wholeness, and being. And if you think of the yin yang sort of placed on top of this, and the motion of the masculine and feminine in harmony with each other is what actually generates the energy to move inward. So it's one of the things. Love is always the motivator. So the love between the masculine and feminine, the balance, that powerful generating machine is fueled on love and relationship and balance, harmony. Okay, where does the harmony come from? It comes from love. So the love between the masculine and feminine, the honoring of the other, the feeding each other, nourishing each other, strengthening each other, and creating this motion and movement of sway between the masculine and feminine inside of us. I want to just repeat one more time as we finish up here. This is our last slide. That this is not about male and female. There are some tendencies that tend to overlap, but be careful about reductionism and applying that to people. When we use a reductionist model like that, we bring it down and sort of concretize it into male and female bodies and male and female relationships. We take all of the spiritual magic and nuance out of it, and then it becomes a weapon. And it becomes a weapon to say which kind of people should relate in what way, should behave in what way. And as soon as it's being used like that, it is no longer spiritual. It has become so dense. Weaponizing something brings it right down to survival consciousness, right? And so when we bring it down to that vibrational level, it's now totally outside of spiritual consciousness. Now, it's a developmental step, and it's natural that we go there. But in this spiritual practice, we have to be very cautious, and weaponizing anything is a very clear indication that you've fallen into that first vibrational consciousness, the lowest vibrational consciousness, survival and individuality. So remember to apply this spiritually, and mostly to apply it to yourself and your own growth. That's what it's for. It's to help you go deeper, become more balanced, more healthy. And when we're doing that individually, then we will do it as a group. We will be healthy and balanced and have this momentum as spiritual groups, as spiritual communities, as leaders, and in connection with one another. That's it. Thank you. Blessings.